Before America entered World War II, there was much concern that the Germans, who were already familiar with nuclear fission, would build an atomic bomb. Albert Einstein, along with many other scientists, urged President Roosevelt to undertake its development. Roosevelt ultimately agreed, and the task became known as the Manhattan Project. Lieutenant General Leslie Richard Groves, Jr., the United States Army Corps of Engineer officer, was at the head of the Manhattan Project and made all the important decisions himself. He recruited Oppenheimer as the scientific director to construct and run the atomic factories. Groves himself drew up the plan of the project and took all the necessary steps to put it in action immediately. He regularly bypassed Stimson and General Marshall to ensure the success of his project. Leadership is a mix of qualities that inspire and motivate others to reach a certain goal. Groves was a fantastic leader, and he did a great job maintaining these qualities of leadership as the commander of the Manhattan Project. Stimson had begun his second term as the Secretary of War in 1940. Because of this, he was trusted in the assisting in the Manhattan Project. Before Roosevelt's death, Stimson had a conversation with the President regarding the importance of the atomic bomb. The conversation covered three main aspects. First, it was necessary to suppress any lingering doubt that the bomb would be successful. Second, it was imperative to consider the implications of this success in terms of long-range post-war effect. Third, the members of the Manhattan Project had to be prepared to face the controversy that the first use of the atomic bomb would present. They needed to prepare a clear public statement that explains the objective. From this conversation, it was evident that Roosevelt planned on using the atomic bomb in one way or another. Roosevelt died unexpectedly on April 12, 1945. Vice President Harry Truman took his place as the President of the United States. On the same day of Roosevelt's death, a cabinet meeting was held in the West Wing of the White House. After the meeting, Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson stopped President Truman. In a low voice, he described a weapon of tremendous power that the United States had been working on. However, he never revealed to Truman exactly what it was. After the meeting on April 12th, Stimson was a little skeptical regarding President Truman's ability to handle the atomic secrets. Later that night, he wrote in his diary, "Truman made the impression on me of a man who is willing and anxious to learn, but he is laboring with the terrific handicap of becoming president, where the threads of information were so multitudinous that only the long previous familiarity could allow him to control them." Furthermore, Stimson was unsure whether the world could control such a terrible force. He feared that the use of the atomic bomb could destroy modern civilization. In response to Stimson's warnings, Truman and Groves created the Interim Committee to study whether or not the U.S. should use the atomic bomb against Japan. This group would be made up of the top atomic scientists, cabinet officials, and a personal representative of the president. Despite Stimson's fear of the atomic bomb's destructive power, he admitted that it was the common objective to be the first country to make and use the atomic bomb. Various members after the fact said that the talk in the meeting was based on the assumption that the bomb would be used against Japan. When Burns, the president's personal representative, heard the scientists talking about the destructive power of the atomic bomb, he became frightened. The atom bomb testing happened on July 16th in New Mexico, and it was immediately evident that the use of this weapon measured up to the highest estimates. It produced enough power to shock potentially the Japanese ruling oligarchy, increasing the possibility of peace and weakening the Japanese military. In result of this successful test, Truman and his associates did not avoid the idea of using the atomic bomb against Japan. They saw no reason to focus on any alternative actions because they viewed the atomic bomb as just another advantage that the Allies held in the war. The Soviets had just entered the war in the Pacific against Japan, and together they hoped that the atomic bomb would secure victory before any more of their troops had to die. The Americans had already experimented with many other strategies while trying to get the Japanese to surrender. They tried tightening the naval blockage of the Japanese home islands, and they also tried the conventional bombing of the Japanese cities, as well as preparing for ground war. Each of these approaches were expected to play a part in the American victory. However, none of these approaches were working. The Japanese showed no sign of altering their theory of death over surrender, and they were willing to commit suicide before giving themselves up to the Americans. No matter how many deaths that the Japanese suffered in battle, they were determined to continue fighting. Even the American bombing campaigns did not dent their resolve. Americans initially expected that fighting on Japanese soil would cause them to surrender. However, this campaign was much more costly than Americans thought it would be. In result, the atomic bomb was not only a good choice, but quite possibly the only choice left. There was no serious debate among the responsible decision makers as to whether or not dropping the bomb was the right decision. The concern of the scientists such as Leo Szilard, who predicted nuclear's arms race, did not get in the way of the policymakers' decision, whose only responsibility was to win the war. Groves remained a central figure in the decision-making process, and he continued to push for the atomic bomb and help keep the Manhattan Project going. Using the atomic bomb would enhance the careers of those involved in the Manhattan Project, especially Groves's. There is also a buildup of racism and desire for retribution and revenge towards the Japanese because of Pearl Harbor and their other atrocities during war. Lastly, Groves, along with others, believed that the bomb could be used for leverage against the Soviet Union. Dr. Stearns is the man responsible for the research on possible target selections in Japan. He surveyed his possible target options based on the following criteria. 1. It must be a large urban area, at least 3 miles in diameter, that has some significance to Japan. 2. It must be capable of being damaged effectively by a blast. 3. It is unlikely to already have been attacked by next August, which was the planned time of the atomic bomb dropping. All members of the conference agreed that the weapon should only be used in a large area that can be significantly damaged. They did not want to risk dropping the bomb in a place that would only do minimal damage. The 4 final locations for the bombing were Kyoto, Hiroshima, Yokohama, or Kokura Arsenal. However, Simpson was concerned with one of the cities on the list. With President Truman's warm support, I struck off the list of suggested targets the city of Kyoto. Although it was a target of considerable military importance, it had been the ancient capital of Japan and was a shrine of Japanese art and culture. We determined that it should be spared. I approved of 4 other targets, including the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The psychological factors in the target selection were also of great importance. Dropping the atomic bomb would have a significant psychological effect against Japan. The initial use of this bomb would show off to other countries how detrimental this weapon is. Hiroshima is a large industrious city, and destroying a large part of the city would be critical in forcing Japan to surrender. Further, the New York Times described Hiroshima as a city of 318,000, which is or was a major quartermaster depot and port of embarkation for the Japanese. In addition to large military supply depots, it manufactured ordnance, mainly large guns and tanks, and machine tools and aircraft ordnance parts. Because of this, Hiroshima proved to be the perfect target. The devastation resulting from the dropping of the atomic bomb, nicknamed Little Boy, on Hiroshima did not convince Japan to accept America's demand for unconditional surrender. The United States, however, already planned on dropping their second atomic bomb, nicknamed Fat Man, on Nagasaki. The New York Times also wrote an article that seemed to allude to the idea that more than one atomic bomb planned on being used. Secretary Simpson said that this new weapon should prove a tremendous aid in the shortening of the war against Japan, and there were others responsible officials who privately thought that this idea was extreme understatement, and that Japan might find herself unable to stay in the war under the coming of raining atomic bombs. Stimson, who at the beginning was not thrilled about the idea of dropping the atomic bomb, now seemed as if he wanted another bomb dropped on Japan. Truman did not care too much about the specific details of the attack. He had full trust in the administrative system beneath him. Both Stimson and Truman handed over the decision-making and the planning of the second atom bomb use to the Air Force. Fat Man was originally planned on being dropped on August 11th. Because of bad weather, the date got moved up to August 9th. Nagasaki was an important shipbuilding center in Japan. The bomb unleashed 22,000 tons of TNT, and the hills that surrounded the city did a good job of containing the destructive force. Between 60,000 and 80,000 were killed, but exact numbers are impossible to find out because the bomb obliterated so many bodies. Groves estimated that another bomb would be ready to be used against Japan as early as August 17 or 18. The Japanese War Council at the time was still divided and unsure whether or not they should continue fighting in the war. Emperor Hirohito was on the side that was eager to end the war. He declared that continuing the war could only result in the annihilation of the Japanese people. As a result, he gave permission for unconditional surrender. Before the atomic bombings, Grove had little knowledge on the dangers of the spread of radiation. He did not receive any advice on this matter. After the atomic bombings, there were reports from Japan that indicated a new kind of sickness, soon to be known as radiation sickness. Groves was unprepared for such shocking news, and he ordered teams of physicians and scientists to enter Hiroshima and Nagasaki ahead of American troops to make sure they did not enter areas that were contaminated by this sickness. There was a lot of controversy in America that questioned whether or not dropping the atomic bomb was the moral thing to do. However, the leaders that made the decision knew how devastating it was going to be. At the same time, they hoped that the bomb would never have to be used again. After the Americans dropped the bomb on Nagasaki, Groves reflected back on the decision. He admitted that the bomb did not necessarily win the war, however it did end it, and in doing so it saved both Japanese and American lives in the long run. In this respect, the decision to drop the atomic bomb was justified. In the end, Winston Churchill believed that the United States had come out of World War II as the most powerful nation on earth. There was still fear, however, because other nations were now developing their own atomic bombs.